Guide Dogs for the Blind Client Town Hall. Canine Genetics Update, August 2021. Guest speakers are participating in the town hall via video conference. Each person has a different virtual background.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris Benninger. I'm the CEO at Guide Dogs for the Blind. I just want to welcome you. We're going to start off a little bit. I'm just going to let everybody make certain that everybody gets into the meeting. People are joining fast and furiously. Actually, among all of us panelists, we actually have a little bit of a bet about how many people are going to be coming. So I bet high. So I'm hoping lots and lots and lots of people come. But it's great to see. It's great to see the numbers going up. And I'm going to give it a minute or two just to make certain everybody gets in the door. And then we're going to go ahead and start. We're so thrilled to have all of you here. Most definitely. Great. I'm going to give it 30 more seconds. Then I'm going to kick it off. And I'm looking forward to it. All right, we're going to go ahead and start. Well, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to have you here. As I said earlier, I'm Chris Benninger. I'm the CEO at Guide Dogs for the Blind. And we're thrilled actually to have this town hall to answer really any questions that you might have. But I want to start by just giving you a little bit of background, and then I'm going to introduce all of our panelists, and then we're going to show you a video. But you know, we're going to talk today with regards to a new genetic test that has just become available to us at really within the guide dog industry. And this is literally brand new. From my perspective, I've really only known about this for probably less than 3 weeks. So, you know, this is the latest and greatest information that we have. We're not going to have all the answers for you. The thing I do want to emphasize is the fact that we're actually very excited that, you know, genetic technology is improving in the ways that it is, because the more information that we have, the better job that we can do with our breeding population, the better job that we can do in ensuring that every single dog that is paired with one of our clients is the best possible dog for the work that they're going to be doing. So we're really excited by all of the information that we currently have. It is going to mean that there is a little bit of transition time, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I just want everybody to understand that this is good news, and it's nothing really to be concerned about. So let me start by saying that you have the best and brightest minds here today on our panel, and I'd like to go ahead and introduce them and just, you know, ask each one of you just to say a quick hi. So let me start with Kristen Lucas, who is our Client and Canines Operations Manager.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And then Susan Armstrong, who is our VP of Client Training and Veterinary Operations on the Oregon campus.
Hello, everyone. It's great to have you all join us today. And in my background is the client residence on the California campus with some willow trees in front.
And Lauren Kenny, who is our Director of Client Services.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back with all of you again.
Teresa Stern, our Vice President of Admissions Outreach and Alumni.
Hello, everyone. And my background is our Rough Life Academy that we used for the kids this summer.
Dr. Kate Kaminsky, who is our Medical Director.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.
Jenna Bullis, Director of Breeding, Canine Care and Development.
Hey everybody, my background is, of course, the Puppy Center.
Vanessa Lyons, our Director of Training in California.
Hi, everyone. It's Vanessa. Thanks for joining us.
And Cheryl Vincent, our Director of Training in Oregon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My background's for dogs and training in front of the Oregon Administration Building.
Fantastic. So we're going to start off with a video basically explaining what this new genetic technology is, what it shows us, what it means as far as we know. We're starting actually with a video because as we've been rolling this out to all of our constituencies, we wanted to make certain that we started with the same basic information for everybody. So this video is approximately 30 minutes. And then after the video, actually, we will be opening things up for your questions. And all of our panelists will be available to answer those questions. So on that note, let's go ahead and start the video.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jenna Bullis. I'm the Director of Breeding, Canine Care and Development here at Guide Dogs for the Blind.
And I'm Dr. Kate Kosminski. I'm the Medical Director at Guide Dogs for the Blind.
Kate and I are here to talk to you about some ways in which we manage the health and of our breeding colony and the guide dog population, and some recent developments that have come to light that we feel are important to share with you. So I want to start by explaining that when we're managing the breeding population, we use a wide variety of tools that are at our disposal to make the healthiest dogs that we're able to make for our clients. And we look at a whole variety of factors, and we use a lot of science, and science is constantly evolving and changing, and we try to stay on the cutting edge of that technology. So new information comes to light all the time, and we shift and make decisions based on the information we have available. So historically at Guide Dogs for the Blind, we've used genetic testing for traits that the breeds that we use can have. And we used to test for just specific individual health traits that we knew that there were tests on. And as technology has moved, the pricing of those things has changed, the availability of that has changed, things are more accessible. And in the last 6 or 8 months, we made a decision to shift to what we call panel testing. So economically, it's getting kind of the best bang for your buck to send in some DNA on a dog and you get results on a whole variety of traits that the dog may carry the genes for. And because we share our dogs freely with other schools and around the world, it's important for us to know that information not only for ourselves, but for other schools that we share with. So those panels of a variety of tests, those evolve and change as new tests come on the market and change as well. And so we were going along and having these test results come back, and everything was looking great, and we were making decisions about how we wanted to change our mate selections based on this genetic testing. And about in May, we got some results back, and there was a new test that had been added to the panel that we didn't know about, and one of our dogs had a mutation for that test. And the test is called for a disease called Stargardt's, which Dr. Kate's going to talk about in a little bit more specifically about what that disease is and what it means. And when we got it back in dogs, we were kind of confused because it is something that happens in humans. And so our first step was to find out, well, what is this new test about? And what is this disease in dogs? Is it the same as humans or different? And so we asked our veterinary ophthalmologists that come to our campuses each month to examine our dogs, hey, have you heard about this disease? And they had never heard of it. So we thought, well, that's interesting. Okay, we'll do some more research. So we talked to the lab that does our genetic testing and found a research paper that is a study that was done in Sweden in 2019 on a very small pool of dogs. So there were these 2 Labrador retrievers that were affected with an eye disease, and they started researching them and their parents who were unaffected. And they discovered this gene and published this paper. So when we learned that, we thought, well, it's one family of dogs in Sweden. This is probably not something that's, terribly impactful for us, but we should keep talking about it. And then the next step that happened was Guide Dogs for the Blind is part of a breeding cooperative, a select number of schools around the world that produce dogs for service for guide dogs. And it's called the Original Group. So the Original Group members support each other, share information. We share DNA, best practices, and we have routine meetings where the group gets together and talks about best strategies for producing guide dogs and the best kind of dogs that we can. And so it came up in the group. So several other schools had had the same experience that we had in getting this test result back. And it was kind of a surprise to all of us. And we were all trying to figure out what it meant. So at that point, a couple of the members of the Original Group reached out to the researchers who actually wrote the paper in Sweden. And those researchers very generously offered to meet with our group and to really explain what their research was about and what the implications were. So we had a meeting that from our organization, I attended, Kate attended, one of our other staff veterinarians attended, and one of our consulting veterinary ophthalmologists attended, so that we could all hear this information and decide what it meant for our organization. And during the meeting, it became clear that this is a disease that is not isolated just to this one family. The science on it is very good. And I'm going to now give you a little bit of high school genetics so that we can all be talking about the same thing here and understand how this is inherited. So first of all, I'm going to say that the study that has been published is specifically about Labrador retrievers. So at this time, we don't have any evidence to believe that this has been found in golden retrievers. Certainly it could be found in the Labrador Golden Cross because there is Labrador in that. And it doesn't mean that they won't find a similar gene in Goldens at some point, but it does mean that at this time that hasn't happened. So as we move forward talking in this discussion, we're going to be focusing on talking about Labrador retrievers. So thinking back to high school biology and Mendel and his P's and genetics and how things are inherited, what happens when, for any trait, whether that's coat color or length of coat, or is your hair curly or straight or what have you, an individual person or puppy inherits one copy of a gene that determines those traits from the mother and one copy of the gene from the father. And then those 2 copies of the gene together dictate whether the person or the puppy has that trait. So whether you have blue eyes or brown eyes, or if you're a puppy, if you're chocolate color or not chocolate color. And we're talking about genes or traits that are inherited in what we call a simple dominant autosomal recessive way. So if both parents have only one copy of the mutation that causes the trait that you're talking about, and in this case, we're talking about this disease called Stargardt's, the individual themselves is not affected with the disease, but they carry the gene that can produce the disease. And if the puppy inherits the mutated gene from both parents, that means they have 2 mutations, and it means that they will have the disease. So any dog that doesn't have any mutation or only has a single mutation does not have the disease, and any dog that has 2 copies of the mutation would have the disease. So that's the simple way in which the disease is inherited. So when we found that first dog that had one mutation, we knew that, okay, well, we have to look at both parents. At least one of those carries that copy, even though they aren't affected themselves. So we started doing some testing and finding that we did have some of these genes in our colony, which meant the likelihood of the matchup being some dogs have both copies of the mutation is possible, and that these dogs could be affected with the disease. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to let Kate talk a little bit about the disease itself and what the implications are.
Thanks, Jenna. You know, I'm a veterinarian, so my understanding of Stargardt disease in people is somewhat limited. But what I know about it is it's an inherited disorder of the retina, and so the retina is that tissue at the back of the eye that senses light. We can see reflections. You know, when you look at a cat's eye or a dog's eye, when light comes into it, you see this really beautiful green reflection in something called the tapetum, and that's where some of these changes that we're seeing on Stargardt occurs. And what happens is that this disease causes a degeneration of the photoreceptors, and so photoreceptors sense light, and then they send messages to our brain. And there's cones and there's rods, and the cones in people are associated with the macula. Dogs don't necessarily have that. They have an accumulation of cones that are a little bit more centrally located. And what cones are why they're important is that they note acute detail and color. And rods are located a little bit more, you know, on the edges, the periphery of the retina, and they help us to see in dim light, darkness, help us with our peripheral vision, detect motion, those sort of things. And with Stargardt disease, while both photoreceptors, both cones and rods, can be impacted, it seems to impact the cones far more significantly. And so, in my understanding in people is that someone with Stargardt disease has decreased ability to note color, and their ability to note acuity, like sharp detail, declines. Rods are impacted to a lesser extent. So again, that peripheral vision remains a little bit more intact. My understanding is that in people with the disease, it's rare for somebody to become completely blind from this disease, and it tends to affect people when they're younger, and through their adolescent years, although adults can also become affected with Stargardt. And so what we believe is happening in dogs is really similar to what is happening in people. There is a transporter protein that helps eliminate a fatty substance from this part of the eye. And when you get a mutation of the gene, that's when you get Stargardt disease. And so what happens is that the eye's ability to transport this fatty substance out of the eye is restricted. So it builds up in the eye, and over time it causes degeneration of the cones. And what that does is it impacts the central vision. And dogs do have fewer cones than people, so it doesn't become much of an issue with regard to color, but it is an issue with regard to acuity. We know that dogs in the study that Jenna was talking about, they had a visual impairment, and in daylight and in dim light, sort of around more noticeable, probably the 7 to 10 years of age. We know, the experts that we've spoken to believe that there's 100% certainty, as Jenna said, that dogs with this double mutation will have some form of vision loss over time. But we don't know what that vision loss is going to entail. And to be honest, I don't know if we're ever going to really be able to characterize it well, because the difference obviously with the dog and a person is that a dog won't tell us when they've lost some subtle changes. And so what is likely is that they will adapt over time. They can't tell us what's changing, and they also can't tell us how they are adapting, how they are in the world. Now, there's this 100% certainty that dogs will have some form of vision loss, but what we have learned is that it's really influenced by different factors. So bright light is one of those things. And situations where, if a dog lives in an area that has a lot of sunlight, so maybe in Australia or California, you might see a more rapid progression of the vision changes than you might for a dog who, I don't know, lives in the northern Pacific coast where it's foggy or cloudy. We also have learned that other genes may have a protective effect on this vision loss, on this condition. And there's a whole lot of things that we don't know yet. So I think that we have a lot to learn. Truly, this is brand new information. We don't know how the changes that occur in the retina with this disease in a dog correlates with the dog's vision. We also don't believe that at this time a dog will lose full vision. Up to this point, that hasn't happened yet in some of the dogs who have this genetic mutation. And the interesting thing is that, our experience is that, here at GDB, is that vision loss is not really a common reason for retirement or career change in our dogs. And that's a lot of the experience of the other guide dog schools as well that we're in conversation with. And this may be for a whole lot of reasons. But I think the really main point that I really want people to understand is that it's not that the disease is new, it's that the technology to identify the genetic mutations is new. So we know that in our colony, we've had a genetic mutation for a number of years, and we have not had issue with vision loss in our guide dogs that are in the field. And so again, this is not a new situation. It's just that now that we have the technology to identify it, and so because we have, and we use science to make our breeding decisions and our veterinary decisions, now we need to make those decisions to ensure that, the excellence and the quality of our dogs continues.
So the next step you're probably wondering is, what does this mean? So as Kate said, we use decisions like this all the time or we use the science all the time to make decisions about what's best for our dogs and for our clients. And this is just another example of this. So it's something that we're accustomed to doing. This one is a little bit more impactful because it is something that we have made the decision that we do not want to knowingly graduate any more dogs who have 2 copies of that mutation that could develop this vision loss at some point in their life. It's just something that we don't want to continue doing. We have the science and the information to prevent doing that, and we can, and so we are going to be doing that. Now, it doesn't mean that those dogs are not going to live wonderful, full lives doing other things. And in fact, those other things could still be becoming a canine buddy or joining the breeding colony. And I want to be really clear and go back to our talk about genetics. So if we have a dog that has 2 copies of the mutation, we wouldn't want them to do a job that relied on their visual ability. But being a breeder doesn't rely on your visual ability. And if we make smart decisions about how to breed that dog and pair it with a partner who does not have any copies of the mutation, then all of the subsequent puppies will also not have the disease and can go on to be guide dogs. So that's why a dog would still have the potential to join the breeding colony if they exhibit all the other positive traits that we look for in the dogs that join the breeding population. So these dogs can still be successful in a couple of other ways in our program. They could potentially go on to provide other types of service that does not rely on vision. So it's really a small role that you wouldn't want a dog that had some decline in vision to do, and that is providing safety and mobility for a person with visual impairment. So moving forward, we will not be having those dogs enter the guide program. There will be other options available to them. And so we've already begun to make the breeding decisions about matching appropriate dogs so that none of our puppies that will be born in the future will be affected by this. So that's great news. This is one of the wonderful things about science. As science gives you more information, you can continue to make better decisions and create healthier dogs, basically. So we're grateful that this has come to light now and we can do something about it. And so what this means next for us is that we will be getting complete information on all of our dogs that are currently in the program, either in training or in puppy raising, to know what their status is and know if that changes their career path. And so we will be working towards that. We do not have the full information at this time. So that's the first step. And the next step was to be transparent with all of our constituents and talk to you about it and let you know that this is going on and answer questions that you might have about it. So we're going through a series of these presentations, answering questions. You'll be getting more communications from GDB over the course of time, and as we learn more about this and what it means for us. And we are going to take some questions after this presentation. So I'm just looking over at Kate here thinking, Kate, is there any other information that we want to pass on to people before we close for questions? You're muted. There you go.
Why, thank you. I
We've
think
all
the
had that in Zoom, haven't we?
Yes. The one thing that I think I do want to address, because I know it's going to come up in questions. People are going to say, well, can you diagnose it on an eye exam? Or does this mean that I should be having my dog go in for more frequent eye exams?
Yep.
And right now, I think the answer for the general practitioner or the general veterinary ophthalmologist, even the specialist, is we as a GP and even a specialized veterinary ophthalmologist don't know what we're looking for yet. One of the research that we spoke to, who is a veterinary ophthalmologist, but more from a researcher standpoint, he said because he has been looking at these dogs, he is now able to identify some of those changes in the tapetum, that really reflective part in the back of the eye, that he knows is associated with dogs who have Stargardt. And some of those changes are things like the reflectivity of that tapetum is decreased somewhat, so it's not as reflective. And there's modeling, there's like little gray changes in very specific areas within the eye. And so he's able now to be able to look in those places strictly from his experience. He has been able to identify it in a dog as young as 1. And he says he's probably missed many because he's still learning as well. By the time that some of these changes are obvious in the eye, and I say obvious to somebody who's super experienced in it, about 60% of the photoreceptors have already been damaged. And I use the example, I used an example of kidney disease. So when we do lab work on animals, we know that if on blood work and on lab work, the results show that the kidney parameters are elevated, like as a veterinarian, I know in a chronic situation that means like 75% of the kidney function is already gone by the time those things show up on the blood work. So what he is saying is that by the time he's starting to see these super subtle changes in the tapetum, in the retina, the 60% of the photoreceptors are already damaged. And again, even if you are able to see those changes, we have no way to understand how it correlates to the actual vision changes that a dog sees. So yes, you can get more annual exams, but in this situation right now, I'll be honest, I don't think it's going to help. It's going to help us or help us diagnose it. usually when, as a veterinarian, when we start seeing why we start looking at the eye at that level is typically when a dog is presented to us for a vision loss. They're bumping into something, or they're running into a doorway, or they're stumbling a little bit. And then we start looking for these things. It's not every day that just on a general annual exam that we would start seeing these things. So yes, exams are helpful, but it may not necessarily be helpful for us in this particular situation.
I found it reassuring, Kate, when we were reviewing the literature and talking to the researchers, that none of the dogs that they studied ever completely lost all of their vision. These dogs, and they kept reiterating that to us, these dogs live full, rich lives as companions. The reason that the original dogs in the studies were identified is that they were highly trained hunting dogs that knew how to gauge retrieving ducks at a very far distance, and they started having trouble doing that. And so the owners were like, well, something's different. So, these are dogs that probably most people wouldn't notice in their lives that they were having a problem, because as you talked about, there's some accommodation and slow progression in dogs adjusting. So that was comforting to know that the dog's quality of life as a companion is not affected at all.
Yeah, and we know that we have this bucket of dogs that have progressive retinal disease, and when we see dogs who are having some vision changes and we are able to identify some retinal changes, we lump them often into this big bucket of retinal degeneration or retinal atrophy as a diagnosis. And it's not that it's this huge bucket or that's overrepresented, or it's a highly significant number of dogs who are experiencing that. It's just another condition, another medical condition. And what I think now, to get people's head wrapped around it again as well, is that it's not like it's this new condition that we're going to be seeing dogs have more vision loss. It's just that probably out of that bucket, we've been able to name more specifically some of the conditions that we're already seeing in that bucket. So I think that's all, Jenna, that I could, I'm certainly happy to answer questions. I'm sure people will have a lot of them.
Yeah, and for people who, I want to clarify, earlier I might have misstated how this is inherited. It is an autosomal recessively inherited trait. And if you're interested in reading the actual paper, all you would need to do is Google Stargardts in dogs, and it is available publicly. And the researchers are currently conducting follow-up studies on this disease that have not yet been published. So again, they were so generous to share information with us, knowing that they're getting ready to publish more information about it, and it was confidential, but they were very dedicated to help our program and know the impact that it has and the care that we take and what it takes to be a guide dog. So we'll go ahead and end and take some questions, and know that we know how to handle this. This is not something that's, while we have to be careful about it, it's not something that is a devastating problem for us to handle. This is what, myself and Kate and our teams, we deal with this kind of stuff all the time. We're grateful to constantly be getting new science, new technology, so that we can make these good decisions. And I'm sure that there will be things that science discovers in the future that we'll need to take action on again. And this is just one of those things. So it's not something that we want people to be terribly concerned about. And we want to be honest and let you know what's going on and how we're addressing it. So thanks for joining us, and we'll take some questions now.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's Lauren from Client Services. I want to thank Jenna and Dr. Kate for all of the information that you shared with us today. So it is a lot of information. We know that folks are going to have questions about that, and we will open up to live question and answer session in a few minutes. Before we do that, we did just want to give some feedback on what we anticipate kind of the most frequently asked questions to be. And so I'm going to field a few of those, and then I'll turn it over and we can see what other live questions we have. The first thing that we want to make sure to share pretty unequivocally at this point is that active guides in the field do not need to immediately retire solely on the basis of having this double mutation. So from what you've heard and what we know, the expert's opinion is that the degree that dogs with 2 copies of this genetic mutation are affected can vary highly due to other genetic and environmental factors. So ultimately, every team is unique, and any decision about that team really needs to be part of a conversation about how that individual team is functioning in guide work and not based on genetic information alone. So we really just want to put that out there in the very beginning to make sure to reassure folks about that. You should continue working your guide. You know, there might be a question of, should I do anything different? Can I still work my guide? Absolutely. Continue working your active guide as you would normally, and any concerns or issues that you may be wondering about in any type of guide work issue, talk to your field manager, let them know what's happening as you would at any other time, follow the same kind of practice. So no difference there in how to handle things. We do understand that you may be wondering how and when you might find out if your particular dog is affected by this genetic mutation, and how and when you might need to go about testing. So I just want to reiterate, and we'll reiterate it, I think, several times throughout this conversation today. What you heard again from Kate and Jenna is that this is not a new disease, right? The technology is new, but the disease itself is not new, and it's likely been around, you know, for some time. And we're just now able scientifically to identify it. And again, statistically, we have not seen a significant number of dogs that have been dropped in the field due to vision issues. So while it's good for us to know genetically what's happening with dogs, certainly something that would be good for you to know if you are interested. We don't need to rush into gathering information. We could be methodical and thorough, which is how we like to approach these things and what we'll do. So just a reminder of that in terms of where we are. We are still gathering information from our breeding colony. When I say information, I mean the genetic information, since that's how we would identify this. So we are looking at information from sire and dam. So going back to what Jenna was saying, the parentage of dogs that may be out in the field, some of those we'll be able to find out information from the parents. And we will share information that we learn that way with you. It is going to take some time. There's a lot of dogs to test, and Jenna's working very, very hard on that, as everyone here is. And so it will take a little bit of time, and we will let you know the plan that we put together and how we're going to roll that information out to you for what we do know based on our own data collection. And then we'll also let you know, for those that we may not have complete information on for dogs in the field, about accessible options maybe for testing, if you're interested. And I say if you're interested because at this point we are not anticipating that we're going to require testing for dogs in the field, for the reasons we just mentioned, that it's really about how dogs are functioning, how they're doing their work, versus feeling like we have to test every single dog who's a guide. So but we will share information for those who might be interested as we go along. And to the point you've heard, you don't need to be thinking about right now, how do I get my dog to the vet? Do I need to get my dog to the vet to be tested? As you just heard, this is not something we anticipate that vets are going to be able to maybe have as much information as been shared today, because since it's such cutting edge new kinds of information, also not something that would be identifiable on the physical exam. So please don't feel like you have to rush out to get an appointment for your dog to be evaluated. And finally, the question that I think from my point of view that I wanted to address that I think many people may be asking is, okay, now you've shared this information, might this impact my time to wait to get a new guide? We anticipate that'll be a question that folks might have in their mind. And so what we'd say is it's possible. We don't know for sure exactly what that will look like yet. We are still collecting information, analyzing the data on our breeding colony, our dogs and puppy raising, our dogs in training. And so where it could impact timing to get a new guide, we really can't predict in any way right now what that might be, what the timeline impact might be. And so what we would say is we will do our very best to keep you aware of your individual situation on an individual basis to the very best of our ability. And if we do come up with more information that would be helpful and to share with you, we will certainly do that. So those are kind of some of the most frequent questions we thought might be on people's mind. We realize they're not the only questions. So in order to get to some of those other things, I would like to go ahead and turn things over to Teresa Stern, who you will know as our VP of Admissions Outreach and Alumni Services. And Teresa is going to explain how this live Q&A session will work. And then she's also going to give some helpful accessibility tips and instructions. So Teresa, take it away.
All right, everyone. Yes. Let me just tell you a little bit about what's going on. So we have the ability to do Q&A and raise your hand type of questions. We've got about 20 minutes. So we would ask that if you have specific questions that are very specific to you and your dog and your situation, that would be best to call the support center or talk to your field service manager. If you have more general questions, that you think the whole group would sort of learn something from, then go ahead and do that. But we will ask that folks are brief so that we can get to as many people as possible. So for those of you who are a little bit newer with Zoom and would like some information on keystrokes to kind of help you navigate. So if you would like to mute or unmute, it's like a toggle. So from your PC, you're going to hit Alt-A. From a Mac, you're going to hit Command-Shift-A. If you're using the app on your phone or something like that, it's the mute area is down on the bottom left-hand corner. And from the phone, it's *6. And then if you'd like to raise your hand, you've got a question, you're going to go ahead and from the PC, Alt-Y will raise your hand. From the Mac, Option Y will raise your hand. From the app, you're going to go down to the little more sign on the right-hand side of your screen, push that, and raise hand will be one of the options that pops up. And from your phone, if you're calling in from your phone, *9 will raise your hand. And we have the lovely, our directors of training, Vanessa and Cheryl, who are going to be managing the calls along with Susan Armstrong. So I will just pop it on over to you guys.
Thank you, Teresa. This is Cheryl Vincent, everybody. Hello again. We're going to start with the raised hand feature, but then we're going to alternate. So we'll do a raised hand option, then the Q&A option, and go back and forth just so that we have a chance to have everyone get their questions answered. So when I call on your name, I'm monitoring the raised hand section. So when I call on your name, if you can go ahead and unmute and then ask your question, and then the panel will answer you. So our first raised hand person is Sharon Greenberg. So Sharon, go ahead and unmute and then ask your question. Here we go, helped up. Okay.
There we go.
There you go.
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Sharon.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That was very informative. That's wonderful. I actually have Stargard's. So I thought it was very interesting. So if anybody has any questions about it, I'm happy to be to be leveraged in that way. I'm also very interested to know, since obviously both dogs have to be carriers of the gene and the mutated gene. Are you guys just going to be going through basically the breeder group and checking to see kind of what those matches were and to see, and then test those puppies that kind of come out with that double mutation? Because both carriers, both the male and the female, have to be carriers of both. So, and if so, how will you be communicating that to those of us that possibly have a puppy from those groups?
That sounds like a question for me, Cheryl. It's Jenna here. Great question, Sharon. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we are going back and testing all of our active breeders. We're starting to call in some of our more recently retired breeders and looking at other options that we might have existing genetic material on dogs from the past who have active puppies or guides in the field, and learning those parents' results. That's going to help us in the case where if we can identify that one of the parents does not carry any copies of the mutation, then we would know that all of the puppies in that litter could not be affected by the disease, and then we could notify those folks of that. Similarly, if both parents have 2 copies of the mutation, we would know that the entire litter has 2 copies of the mutation. So we would be able to inform people of that. The trickier part is when both parents are carriers. And so that at that point, the individual dogs would need to be tested to determine their status, because it's kind of a roll of the dice of which copies of the gene they inherit. So they would have the possibility to be totally clear, be a carrier themselves, or have 2 copies of the mutation. Moving forward, we already, as soon as this information came to light, we started making breeding decisions that ensured that we would produce no puppies with 2 copies of the mutation. So we're just in this kind of interim stage where we need to address the puppies and adult dogs that are already in existence before this test was developed, that we would need information on. And then moving forward, it will be kind of a non-issue because we're managing our breeding strategy appropriately. And then I'll toss the second part of your question about how you'll get communicated to back over to Lauren. Thanks for the great question.
Thanks, Jenna. I kind of anticipated taking that baton on the second half, so thank you. So Sharon, yes, the notification in terms of whatever information that we have, whatever genetic information we're able to obtain, that we will share with folks. And when I say we, really that will fall to the client services team, which would be myself and the field managers, in sharing that information that we've received from Jenna and her team with you, because it'll take a little time and because there's quite a few folks to communicate with. We're trying to approach that in a very organized way. And so my expectation is that you will be getting another message from us about what our plan for that notification is. And then any folks that we don't necessarily have definitive information in terms of yes, the mutation is present or no, it's not, then we'll have individual conversations about whether folks feel like they would like to have their dog tested and how that would work.
Okay, it's Vanessa, and coming to you from the Q&A. I'm going to combine 2 questions for you, Dr. Kate. Will the guide show signs physically of the disease? And what does treatment look like if one's dog is affected?
Yeah, good questions. And I'm afraid that some of the answers to some of these questions will be we don't know. My understanding is that there's not a treatment for the disease in dogs. Physically, there does not appear, with the information that I have right now anyways, to really be any physical signs or physical effects other than subtle signs of perhaps vision loss. It's not like cataracts that are secondary to, say, diabetes, where a physical effect of that might be glaucoma. There's not like a secondary physical effect that we're aware of in dogs. They just lose their vision, or their vision is affected in some manner, I guess is the more appropriate and accurate way to say that. Did I answer those, Vanessa, both?
Yes, I think so. Pass it back to Cheryl.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. Next on the raised hand option is Kareem. You can go ahead and unmute Kareem and ask your question.
It's Alt-A to unmute from your PC, if you're on a PC. Command-Shift-A on the Mac. *6 if you're on your phone.
And I can hit an unmute as well, so I'll go ahead and do that.
Oh, that's even better.
Here you go. You're up, Kareem.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for sending me the unmute. Your instructions are a little bit off.
Oh.
In that, in this webinar version of Zoom, there is no unmute button on the app. It's only a raise hand in the bottom left.
Oh, okay, good to know. Thank you.
So I had to wait until you sent me the unmute.
Got it. Thank you.
Request, yeah. So as a geneticist myself, I had a couple of questions for you. One, I may have missed it because my internet cut out at the beginning during the video. For the panel screening, it's just testing for the presence of the recessive gene. Is that correct? It's only checking for presence, but it won't tell you whether you have one copy or two.
So I'm going to jump in here, Kareem. This is Jenna. It is actually giving us the information on both copies that were inherited and whether they are mutated copies or normal copies. So we will get the information if they are wild type, which means normal, two copies of the normal, or wild type mutation or mutation. So the DNA tests are telling us the full information on the individual tested.
Okay. The other question I had for you with that, in terms of breeding out the disease, would it not be prudent to not use dogs who are positive for the mutated gene in the breeding program so that you would breed it out completely?
That is a wonderful comment and true. And it depends on, that is our ultimate goal and what we will ultimately do. And what's important to do for when you're managing a colony of animals is that you want to make sure to, the old phrase, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So a lot of these dogs that may carry the mutation also carry a lot of traits that are really valuable. And so we need to take a slow approach over time where we work on each generation, reducing the frequency of the gene in the colony until we do eliminate it. But our first step is to guarantee that we won't produce any puppies that would be affected, which is the most important thing. And then beyond that, we'll work towards just eliminating the gene from the colony in a way that doesn't reduce the positive genes that we want as well, if that makes sense.
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. And also the third bit I had was that for puppies who are showing positive, but for only one recessive gene, could they still be used as guide dogs? I would think the answer would be yes, because they are not affected by the physical manifestation of the disease.
You are absolutely correct. So yes, if they have one copy, they are not going to be subject to vision loss as a result of this disease, and they would be fine to go on for any of the options of career service for us.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you.
I think you might have to mute me.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you. And I will toss it back to Vanessa.
Jenna, I'm going to keep you talking by reading a question that says, what other inherited traits do you test for, and how has this improved the breeders, puppies, and resulting guide dogs?
Well, that's a great question. The panel that we're doing, first of all, one needs to keep in mind that there's only a small number of traits that are controlled by a single gene. So most things are multifactorial, so or polygenetic. So many genes in combination work to produce a trait of, confidence or fearfulness or, what have you. So many things are controlled by many genes, and it's not so simple as the one that we're facing. Some of the genes or some of the traits that we have long tested for are things like exercise-induced collapse in the Labrador Retriever, ichthyosis in the Golden Retriever, which is a flaky skin condition. Those are just two examples of diseases that are controlled by a single gene, and there is a gene test available for those. So the current panel that we are using for the Labradors, I think there's like 12 different diseases that are controlled by a single gene and in the same manner that Stargardt's is. We've not seen in, I think, 9 of the 10 or 11, however many are on the DNA panel. And again, this changes all the time as new science and new tests are developed, which is why this one has just hit the radar. We're clear on all the other things that can be tested for, so that's really great news. And most of our focus is in working on the harder ones, which are the ones that have multiple genes that contribute towards having a dog that can perform guide work.
Thank you, Jenna. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. And Judith Clark, you're up next, and I will go ahead and unmute you so you can go ahead and ask your question.
Well, actually, I think all of my questions have been answered. I'm very familiar with Stargardt as a former pediatric ICU nurse. We saw that surprisingly often. And I guess, and we had someone in my getting to know what the lifestyle of a guide dog is with Stargardt. And so I wanted to know, more about clients with Stargardt. But I think we've gone through that. It's wonderful to have the genetic information, and I'm just loving this Zoom call. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll mute you there. And Vanessa, I'll go ahead and do another one question here. And it's a phone number. It's with the area code 510. You are up next, and I just unmuted you.
Hi there. This is Tony. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. Tony, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I was curious. I think you mentioned that the where this really starts to show up is between 7 and 10 years old, and I was wondering, are you screening for any other eye conditions? Because it's not uncommon for dogs to lose their sight, as it's not uncommon for us to lose sight as we get older. I was wondering if there were any other conditions that, because if you get 10 years out of a working guide dog, it seems like you've done well. If you get even 7 or 8 good years out of a working guide dog, you've done well. So anyway, that was just a curiosity if there's any other conditions that you screen for, or what is the most common thing that happens with a dog with their vision as they age.
So a question for Kate.
Yeah, I think it might be a question for both of us. Jenna, you can talk. I'll just talk. I'll briefly talk about some of the diseases we might see, the eye conditions as far as what we consider normal aging, and maybe you can jump in, Jenna, to talk about the testing. Yeah, we again, I think that one of the most common things that we might see in dogs in general, and I don't mean just with our guide dogs and our service dogs, but just as a general practitioner, is a retinal degeneration, a retinal atrophy type of thing that we see in older dogs, and that seems to be an age-related, really broad category. We do see cataracts that are often associated with, secondary conditions such as diabetes. And again, I'm talking about dogs in general, not just specifically to guide dogs. Within our organization and other service dogs, I don't see the cases that we know have some vision loss or maybe vision changes are no different than what I think we see in general practitioners see in general practice, which would be progressive retinal atrophy or retinal degeneration, those type of things, to be honest.
And I can jump onto that, Kate. So on the DNA panel that we're doing, there are several single gene controlled diseases that affect vision in Labrador retrievers, and we do test for those. So macular corneal dystrophy, retinal dysplasia, and progressive retinal atrophy, also referred to as PRCD, which is progressive broad cone degeneration. So we've been testing for PRA, which is one of the more common retinal degeneration causes in Labrador retrievers. And that test has been on the market for many, many, many years. And our colony was cleared of that disease probably 20 years ago. So every once in a while, when there is a dog in the field who has some retinal degeneration and is being seen by a veterinary ophthalmologist, one of the questions that person would ask is, has this dog been screened for PRA? And because we cleared it from the colony, we assume that our dogs are clear by parentage. And so in those individual cases, we'll go ahead and submit a test, and they always come back negative for that disease being the cause, or sorry, for that gene being the cause of the disease. But as Kate talked about in the presentation, there are many things that can cause retinal degeneration, and not all of them are identified by a specific genetic mutation. Great question, Tony.
It's Lauren. I was wondering if I could jump in a little bit. Tony, I think if I was hearing your question right too, you mentioned that your understanding was that some of the disease manifestations show up between the ages of 7 and 10. And I just wanted to check in with Jenna and Kate to see if we're actually able to pinpoint it that much, or if there's less clarity on for Stargardt's when it might show up. So just a point I thought maybe to emphasize.
I think that what we, all that we know is truly from the minimal amount of research that has truly been done at this stage. What we know is that in some of the dogs that have been identified who had some changes, those changes were happening, were most easily identified between 6 and 10, and the Labrador retrievers that were part of the original study, I believe that was around 7-ish, 8 years of age when they started to notice that they were having some vision changes. I think it's too early to be able to really give information that says specifically when, being able to talk about this topic in dogs as a general information, because I think we are still learning. Because right now I know that veterinarians that are in vet school do not have a chapter on Stargart that says at this age, this is when we start seeing the changes. And this is part of the beauty of science. This is like we're just learning in this moment.
I just had one more, if I could. I was wondering for graduates who may have a dog that that has the gene that's carrying this. Will the graduates be informed so potentially we can check in with the vet?
So it's Lauren, Tony from Client Services. So we will, if we have genetic information, whatever genetic information we're able to find out about your dog from testing of parents that's available, we'll share that with you. We're still trying to figure out exactly how we're going to roll out that information just because of the volume of it, but we will share that with you, whatever we do know, and then have conversation with you as needed on your individual situation.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, panel. Great info. I'm going to toss it back to Vanessa.
Okay, along the same lines, Lauren, we have a few questions I think are touching on what clients can do next, or what we would like to ask of clients next. So I'm just going to read those questions and let you expand on that thought. So what can we as blind partners of our guides and our veterinarians do to help you make informed decisions? I've heard let me start over. I have heard from some friends that you're testing current guides to pinpoint breeding lines that have been affected. Are you testing guides on a wide scale? And then lastly, there's a question about receiving the contact information for DNA testing and allowing clients to individually send in DNA testing for their guides.
All good questions. I will answer what I can and welcome Kate and Jenna to jump in. So some of my short-term memory is a little affected these days in the order that we're going in, but we right now, in terms of what can you do, I think that's a natural question we all ask, right? We have this information, now what do we do with it? And sorry to kind of beat the same drum, but I would say, again, this is not a new disease, so we're not asking you to do anything different today than you were doing, a month ago, several months ago, in terms of being aware in general of your dog, how it's performing, its health. I think it comes down to performance and function. And if you have any issues in terms of guide work, how your dog is performing its guide work, I think you can be in touch with your field manager so you can talk that through. But there isn't anything specifically different, I would say, you need to do in interacting with your guide because of this new discovery than you've done before. But I really appreciate the question about how to partner with us, and sharing information, I think is one of the best things you can do. So if you are noticing anything that are changes in guide work, let us know. We're not actively testing guides right now in the field. What we are doing is looking at the genetic information of the sire and dam that we have. So in our breeding colony, Jen is looking at the parentage versus the individual guides right now. We do want to be able to offer information on accessible testing for dogs. We are asking that folks wait until we complete our testing of our colony, because if we're testing the sire and the dam, we may be able to get the information to you from that testing versus you having to go out and do a test right now for your dog that we may wind up being able to answer for you based on our own information. And I would say too that, again, we aren't anticipating at this point of requiring folks to test their dog if we don't have the confirmative information, because again, it is so much based on how your dog is performing versus us making a decision just on the genetics. But we do want to offer you options because we do understand you may be interested. And so again, just that timeline, we'll do our information, we'll get our information from what our testing is, we'll share it with you. And then if we do not have all of the information and you'd like to pursue testing, we'll let you know how to do that It'll take a little while, but there isn't a rush in terms of you missing anything, I would say. Jenna or Kate, anything to add to that? Looks like.
The only thing that I would add in response to the question about how do we partner, how do we collaborate, I do think that if you do have a dog who you are seeing an ophthalmologist or is having vision issues, I think it's really helpful for us to be able to have those medical records. And so just getting those medical records in through the support center or through VFA would be just really helpful for us if we ever wanted that information down the road.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. That's great. And if folks ever have a question on how to do that, call the 800 number and we'll be happy to walk you through it.
Thank you, guys. I think you touched on all of the points as I've interpreted the questions. So back to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Vanessa. The next person that's up is Nyla Farah. I'm going to unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Cheryl, I think Nyla is still muted.
I see that.
Hi guys, you just unmuted me again. Karim here instead of Nyla.
Go.
Thank you, Karim.
So I'm hitting the ask to unmute. Nyla, if you have a way to unmute yourself.
Oh, I got it. I got it. Sorry. Yeah.
Right.
There you are.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being with us.
It's just a point of clarification that I'm seeking here. Did I understand that correctly, that the research study in Sweden was strictly done on Labrador retrievers, excluding golden retrievers? Did I get that correctly?
Hi, Naya, it's Jenna here. The study is only on Labrador retrievers. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not possible for a golden to be affected, but there's no research at this time that suggests that or has come out to say that. So in the breeding colony, we are testing our goldens with the test for the Labradors just to be sure. And so far, all the goldens have tested clear on that. So that's all we can say definitively at this time.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for the clarification, because I thought that if golden do not carry the gene, then perhaps I'm safe because my dog is half-half. So no such conclusion can be drawn at this point in time.
It's highly likely that that is true if your dog is half lab, half golden. If the goldens only carry the normal genes, then your dog would not be affected. And so there's nothing to suggest at this time that goldens do carry that mutation. I'm hedging my bets a little because as science continues on, there could be a study, next year that says, oh, we found a similar gene in goldens. But at this time, there is no information to suggest that that's true.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the answer.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Nyla and Jenna. And Vanessa, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Okay, the next question. What are the next steps in this area of research?
Jenna, my answer, thank you for the question. And my answer right now is I don't know, is the truth. And so Jenna, maybe you have more information.
Yeah, all that we know from the researchers is that they are continuing their studies, and they, as tends to happen with research, is the researchers will be working a topic, and over time they will publish multiple papers on that topic as they continue to gather more and more information. And so we know that they are continuing to work on this disease and to test and assess more dogs, and they plan to publish more. They told us they were publishing more. So we know that there are more dogs that they have looked at and identified the gene in than just the dogs that were in that original study. If you read, Google it and read it. but we don't know what the content of those papers are until they are published. So we don't have a lot more information.
Thank you. Jump in there, Cheryl. And we're out of questions that have been typed in, so we'll just leave things with you for the raised hands.
Okay, we have a few more left. Louise Johnson, you're next. I'm going to hit the allow to talk button.
Hello, everyone. Okay, my question is, and it's, thank you for the information. It's been really helpful. Okay, so my question comes down to some of the questions that no one's thinking of is the fact some of us have got older dogs, and I'm not going to use mine as an example, but I'm just going to say there's dogs out there anywhere from 6 to 10 years old in the field. So their breeders have now maybe passed away. How do we, as users, feel comfortable that our dogs don't have it or could not have it? You know, the genes. So let's say one of my parents of my dogs have passed away in the process of you not getting the information. So this is a question, and most likely there's others out there could be in a situation. I don't know if my breeders are still alive, you know, but it's a question that I thought of that is important to reassuring us as users.
It's Lauren, Louise, and I will ask Jenna to weigh in too to make sure I'm giving the correct information. But yes, you're right. We will have the access to some of the parents of dogs in the field. But to your point, for those that have older guides, we may not have access to both parents. Maybe we'll have one, but not the other in terms of genetic material. So we won't have definitive information for every guide in the field from our breeding colony. And in those situations where we don't have, that's when we reach out to you to talk about how testing can be accessed and to talk about whether you want to do that, because you will, we'll talk about the option and the decision and whether you think it is something you'd like to do and then how to go about doing that. So that's our plan. Jenna, other? Did I get that right?
I had one more part to that question and I forgot to say it.
Sure.
The other part to my question was, because we've got older dogs in the field, some of us, the older the dog is, the chance you're saying that they could have it is getting in. I know you got to get through the breeding department part first, but I think some of the older breeders should be tested next so we can go backwards, because the ones of us who maybe have dogs in the field, we have a warning that our dogs could have it, who are older, might be helpful. And that was, I didn't word it in my first part of my question. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you for adding that. And I'm gonna have Jenna talk about risk. Okay. But I think that my sense is that the fact that a dog is an older dog doesn't necessarily elevate the chance that your dog has the disease over another. But I'm gonna let Jenna answer and then we can go from there.
Great questions, Louise. It's Jenna here. So I want to let everybody know that we actually, because we have long had a cryogenics program here at Guide Dogs for the Blind, where we collect and freeze semen on all of our stud dogs, and we have that on site. That's one of the ways in which we can get genetic information on a dog who has long been deceased. And so we have already begun to send some of that frozen semen into the lab to get information on sires. And that will be helpful for any sire that is clear of any mutation. We would know that any of their offspring, regardless of the status of the mother, would not be potentially affected with the disease. So we're working on that part as well. We have already pulled some of that material out of our tanks and sent it in, and we have plans to do more of that. And then, as Lauren said, in some cases, that's not going to give us the answer because the sire might be a carrier and we don't have access to females that have passed away because we don't have any of their genetic material. So at that point, it would be about testing the individual dog, and you can have a conversation with your field manager and our staff veterinarians to determine at what level priority that needs to happen if you have any concerns about what's going on, and we'll take those as a case by case.
The one other piece I would add, just kind of in closing to your question, Louise, and for other folks who might be wondering the same thing too, is, the presence of the double mutation itself also does not mean that your dog is incapable of guiding, depending on how it's showing up in your dog. So I just want to, make sure folks are understanding that too, that even though the dog may have it, it doesn't mean that they automatically need to retire. So I would say, what you could do too is, as we're still figuring out some of this information, is keep an eye on how your dog is doing as a dog in general as it gets older, and not just about vision, but other ways it's performing its job. And if there's anything to you that's indicating concern, to please let your field manager know so we can talk through your situation.
And I also got a request to give a little bit of information about labs that are testing for this disease. There are only 3 labs in the US that are currently conducting the test for Stargardt's. We happen to use a laboratory called Paw Print Genetics that's in the Pacific Northwest. And all of the labs take samples from members of the public. We're not the only, it's not just research institutions and large breeding operations. Private individuals, you've heard of like the test to figure out what your mixed breed dog is. It's a similar kind of thing. So it's very accessible by mail, and it's a cheek swab of saliva of the dog, so it's non-invasive. And so if and when we get to that point where individual dogs need to be tested, it's a pretty simple process to be able to do that.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Scott Wilcox. Scott, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And I'm hitting all the unmute buttons. Scott, if you have a way to unmute yourself, then you might want to give that a try. There we go. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we got you. Thanks, Scott.
Oh, great. I just want to say thanks for being on the cutting edge of all this and for sharing this information with us. I know you said earlier that it wasn't a large population of our guide dogs that tend to retire early due to retina degeneration or vision loss in general. I was just wondering if you have a percentage of that historically, since more than likely some of that may have been contributed by Stargardt's. But just wondering if you have a percentage out there.
Good question, Scott. This is Kate. No, we don't actually, to be perfectly honest. I think one of the things that struck me when you were asking the question is when you mentioned retire early and due to vision loss, and I don't get the sense so much that that we retire dogs earlier than expected for vision loss. Often, my sense is it tends to happen more in older dogs, and as some of our other aging changes are happening. So I'm sorry, I don't have that information for you, and I just want to make sure, I don't want you to be left with the sense that we are retiring dogs earlier than expected for vision loss issues, because that's definitely not my experience.
Okay, well, that's great to know. Then it probably is not going to be a huge issue for us. Then is what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, I think that's my sense too, Scott, to be honest.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So given the timing, I think what we're going to do is sort of wrap this up. We originally planned on an hour, and many of you have been very patient in being here well past that hour. So if you have raised your hand and we have not gotten to your question. I would ask that you submit that question to igraduatesupport@guidedogs.com, or you can call the support center at 800-295-4050, because we want to make certain that every single question does get answered. We will make certain that everything that has been submitted to us will go back out to you, and to make certain that all questions are answered. We will also have a video recording of this town hall will be made available in a few weeks, so that everybody has the information. And it's our promise to you, as we have more information as we move forward, we will make certain to be communicating with you to make certain that you have the latest information that we have as well. So I really want to say thank you very much to everyone who, all of our clients who were on the call today, and a very big thank you to all of our panelists who I learned something every single time that I go through this. So I really appreciate everybody's efforts today. It was a really great town hall meeting. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Everyone.
For more information about Guide Dogs for the Blind, please visit our website at guidedogs.com or call us at 800-295-4050.